Snow drifted gently across the glowing city streets, where Christmas lights twinkled on every storefront and the scent of roasted chestnuts hung in the air. Daniel Carter, a successful millionaire entrepreneur and devoted single father, was driving home after finishing the last of his Christmas shopping for his little daughter, Lily. His sleek black car purred along the road, its trunk filled with brightly wrapped presents and bags of holiday treats, but Daniel's mind wasn't on the gifts. He was thinking about how empty the holidays sometimes felt despite his wealth. Ever since his wife had passed away, Christmas had been more about trying to keep the sparkle alive for Lily than about joy for himself. As he slowed at a red light near a darkened alley, something caught his eye. A young woman, dressed in torn clothes with a threadbare coat that did little against the biting cold, was crouched beside a dumpster. Her hands shook as she rummaged through black plastic bags, pulling out scraps of food and tucking them into a crumpled paper sack. Daniel felt a sharp pang in his chest. Though he now lived in luxury, he had grown up poor and remembered the hollow ache of hunger all too well. Stepping out of his car, his expensive shoes crunching against the snow, he approached cautiously, unsure if she might run. The woman froze at his presence, her wide, weary eyes filled with both fear and defiance as she clutched the bag of discarded food tightly against her chest. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, her lips pale and cracked from the cold, "I'm not stealing. I just haven't eaten in 2 days." Her voice trembled, carrying both desperation and pride, as though admitting her hunger was the deepest humiliation of all. For a moment, Daniel was at a loss for words. The sight of her shivering form under the falling snow struck a chord in him that no business deal or fortune ever could. He saw not a beggar, but a woman struggling to survive on Christmas Eve, a night when no one should be alone, cold, and hungry. Daniel drew in a breath, his heart heavy, and with a voice softer than he intended, he said, "You don't have to explain yourself, come with me. Let me help." Emily hesitated at Daniel's offer, her thin frame trembling more from distrust than from the cold, for life on the streets had taught her that kindness often came with hidden costs, yet there was something in his eyes, steady, warm, and unthreatening, that made her want to believe him. Reluctantly, she allowed him to guide her toward his car, where the blast of heated air nearly brought tears to her eyes after so many nights spent shivering under bridges and bus stops. The drive was quiet except for the soft Christmas music on the radio, and Emily stared at her reflection in the window, ashamed of her ragged appearance against the polished leather interior. Daniel glanced at her now and then, noticing how she tucked her hands into her sleeves, as if she were afraid of leaving smudges on anything she touched. On impulse, instead of taking her straight to his mansion, he pulled into a small diner still open on the edge of town, and the moment a steaming bowl of soup was placed before her, Emily's restraint crumbled. She ate as though every spoonful was salvation, tears slipping down her cheeks at the taste of real food. Daniel sat across from her, quietly listening as she finally spoke in fragments, her voice halting between bites. She had once been a nurse, she had worked long shifts caring for others, but a tragic accident and mounting hospital bills had cost her everything, forcing her onto the streets when she had no family to fall back on. Though she shared little, Daniel could sense the weight of pain behind her words, the kind that no stranger should have to bear alone. When they finished the meal and stepped back into the crisp night, Emily expected him to drive her back to the same dark alleys she had come from, but instead, Daniel cleared his throat and said, "I can't leave you out here tonight, it's Christmas Eve. Come home with me, at least for one night. My daughter will be glad to have you as our guest." Emily froze, her instincts screaming to decline, yet her exhaustion and his sincerity broke through her walls, and she found herself nodding. Later, when they arrived at the Carter estate, the grand home glowed with warmth and light, and as Lily ran to the door, her little face lit with delight, she clapped her hands and exclaimed, "Daddy, is she our Christmas guest?" Emily stepped inside the Carter home and immediately felt out of place, the warmth and glow of the house almost painful after so many nights spent in the biting cold, yet Lily's cheerful chatter soon eased her nerves as the little girl pulled her toward the living room where a massive Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments and ribbons. Daniel watched silently, his heart stirring at the sight of his daughter's instant acceptance of a stranger who most people would have ignored or avoided, and he marveled at how quickly Emily's guarded expression softened under the child's innocent joy. That night, over mugs of hot cocoa and the sweet scent of gingerbread cookies, Emily began to laugh again, small, hesitant laughs at first, but genuine enough to bring a smile to Daniel's face. Still, he could not miss the heaviness in her eyes, the shadows that lingered even in her brightest moments, and he wondered about the pieces of her story she had not yet shared. It was only later, when the fire crackled low and Lily had fallen asleep curled on the couch, that Emily finally let her guard down completely. With her hands clasped tightly around the mug, she confessed that her greatest pain was not hunger or cold but the loss of her little girl, a daughter she had once adored and cared for with everything she had, until poverty and homelessness forced her to give the child up to foster care. Her voice broke as she described how powerless she had felt the day the social workers took her daughter away, and how every night since then she had prayed for a miracle to bring them back together. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as the weight of her confession spilled into the quiet room, and Daniel felt his chest tighten, struck by the depth of her grief, for he too understood the aching void left by the loss of a loved one. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her trembling hands with his own, telling her softly that she was not alone anymore, that she was safe here, and as if sensing the sincerity of his words, Emily finally stopped fighting her emotions and allowed herself to cry openly. Then, to Daniel's surprise, Lily stirred in her sleep, murmured something, and without opening her eyes, reached out to hug Emily's arm as if claiming her as family, whispering, "Don't cry, you can be with us now." Christmas morning dawned bright and golden, the Carter home echoing with the kind of laughter Daniel hadn't heard in years as Lily tore through wrapping paper, squealing with joy at her gifts, while Emily sat quietly on the rug, her hands folded in her lap, still unsure if she belonged in such happiness, until Lily suddenly pushed a small, neatly wrapped box into her hands and said with a grin, "This one's for you." Emily hesitated, her heart hammering as she carefully opened it, revealing a delicate bracelet with a tiny silver heart charm, and the child's words, "Now you're part of our family," broke through the last of her defenses, leaving her wiping tears she could no longer hide. But the greatest surprise was yet to come, for Daniel, watching silently from across the room, cleared his throat and handed Emily a thick envelope, his eyes steady with quiet determination. Inside were documents and a letter he had arranged through his lawyers and contacts, explaining that he had located her daughter's foster family and secured permission for a meeting, something Emily had thought was impossible. She gasped, her trembling hands clutching the papers as she looked at him in disbelief, her voice cracking with a whisper, You found her?" Daniel only nodded, saying gently, "No mother should be kept from her child at Christmas." That afternoon, when the knock came at the door, Emily rushed forward, her heart pounding harder than it ever had, and the moment the door opened, a small girl with familiar eyes ran into her arms, crying, "Mama," with all the pent-up longing of years apart. The reunion filled the room with a warmth no fire could match, and Daniel stood back, his eyes glistening as he watched Emily hold her daughter again, their tears mingling with joy, their broken family pieced back together. In that moment, Daniel realized that all the money and success he had built could never compare to the miracle of giving love and restoring hope to someone who had lost everything. As Emily clung to her daughter, she turned to Daniel and whispered through her tears, "You didn't just save me, you gave me back my reason to live." And with Lily hugging them both tightly, Daniel knew that this Christmas was not about wealth or gifts, but about family, the kind you sometimes find in the most unexpected places.